I've got to do it just like my father did it. We're not changing anything. And I've talked to a lot of people in management consulting, and they tell me one of their big problems is change. How do I introduce this piece of equipment? I'm going to have trouble with the union, with employees. They sit around here and they sit in conference tables for a full year trying to figure out how we're going to get this piece of equipment in there. By the way, by that time they should have had 20 more pieces in there. So we say then that variety, or the spice of life, is available only to you when you reach the top of the gate. Now we can do this another way. I can set up a continuum in the positive aura with the very bottom being non-involvement. And now, complete non-involvement, would that be a vegetable? And would it be death? All right, now, would you go at the top of the positive aura, then what would be the very top of infinite affection? Total involvement, and would that be life? Now, can you do that if you have fear? Are you beginning to see then at the top of the positive aura, am I really free when I have total involvement, and total involvement is the only way to have variety? And can you live without variety and be happy? No. And did the Creator intend for us to have variety? Whenever you want to know what the Creator intended for you to have, look at creation. Would you like to tell me tonight how many shades of colors there are on foods you can eat? Let your mind spin through space for a few seconds. By the way, you're still thinking, are you still seeing different colors? Now, for illustrative purposes, and to help you use the diagram to understand people, let's go through a few of them tonight. Let's take the first one. Every time I go into a positive aura, let's assume that I am at point A, I have a certain intensity of emotion. And I will have this particular emotion for a certain thing. And we're going to call this contagion. By the way, let's put our z-axis in. And the z-axis is nothing more than from point 0, it goes straight back. But it is also horizontal and agrees with our time axis, which is x. And our z-axis will be depth. So that when I pull point A out of the diagram, I'm going to bring it straight out this way. I'm going to turn it sideways and lay it down over here. And it will give me a normal distribution curve. Now, I want to show you what I mean by contagion. Let's assume that I have fear here as an emotion. And at the top, I fear horses. Now, what do you suppose resembles a horse? A mule. So a little ways over, I fear a mule, but now am I coming down with less intensity? So do I have a lesser fear for the mule? All right, now out approximately 1 standard deviation, I have a fear of 4-legged animals, like deer and cows. And then if I go another standard deviation, I have all animals. Now, do I fear the deer and the cows less than I do the horses? Because I'm coming down with less intensity. But do I have a slight fear for all animals? That's all we mean by contagion. All right, now let's assume that I pulled A out of my diagram, and this is the feelings that I have for my wife. So instead of a horse here, I'm going to put my wife. Now, what resembles my wife? Her mother. So a little ways away where I had the donkey, I have what? I have my mother-in-law. 1 standard deviation away, I have what? Other women. All women. And 2 standard deviations away, I have humanity. Right now, let's look at this for a moment. Let's assume that my mother-in-law, instead of being up here in a positive aura, is down here, and I hate her. Now I'm going to draw my normal distribution curve. And what kind of feelings will I now have for my wife? Isn't this awful to have to come to a seminar and learn that you have to love your mother-in-law? Let me tell you a story that illustrates this. A man came to me for counseling. He had a real problem. He was impotent. Some of you ladies might not know, but to a man, this is probably one of the most serious problems he could encounter. He wants to know what he's going to do with this serious problem. As I go back to check, I found out that he hated his mother-in-law. It was a real hatred. He told me this particular story. He says, I took the whole family down to the beach. He says, I was walking along out in the sand having a gay old time, and as I put this foot out, I looked down and I saw my mother-in-law's foot. He said, she's got long, skinny toes. And he says, all at once I had this strange psychological thing happen to me. All of the hatred that I had ever had for her, all at once was in that one foot. Have you ever had this kind of a feeling? In other words, he said, ooh, he said, I just couldn't stand that foot. He said, it ruined my whole day at the beach. He says, I just wouldn't look at her feet anymore. He says, now as I was driving back into Portland on Route 26, as I was nearing Portland, I felt like I had left all that bad stuff behind me at the beach. As I was relaxed and I was breathing easier, I was coming back to Portland, it was all going to be over. And then he said, I was getting ready to drop my mother-in-law off at her house, and the real relief came when she got out of the car. He says, now it was just my family. So he drove home. Everything was wonderful. He made up his mind, I'll never take my mother-in-law to the beach again. So that night he was excited from everything at the beach, and he was really ready for a beautiful love affair with his wife. He was in bed first waiting. She was in the bathroom. She wouldn't hurry up. Finally she comes out of the bathroom and gets in bed with him. And there was nothing over him but the sheet. And her foot come out from the edge of that sheet. And he never knew it before. He said, this is the honest truth. He never knew it until that night there was no difference in their feet. Her wife's feet, long, skinny, bony toes. He said, for a moment, he said, I had a feeling that I was in bed with my mother-in-law. But now, I know this is funny, but let's stay with it for just a minute. Now, all the hatred that he had at the beach, what happened? Before he knew what could happen, the hatred went into that foot that was in bed with him. Now, do you suppose they had sexual intercourse that night? No, nor had they had sexual intercourse for 3 months since that night. Now, does he have a problem? Now, what happened was, the hatred that he had for his mother-in-law in that 3 months, what happened to it? It grew. Because if he could leave her in the other part of town, could he sort of block it out? Now, how close was that mother-in-law to him? She was cheating him out of sex. Now, he built up this feeling, she did this, she did this, she took this, and now what did she finally take? Now, can you see? She's gone too far. Right now, when he comes to see me, how much does he hate her? Well, it was to the place where he had some thoughts of getting rid of her. Now, he said he would never kill her, but he would have liked it if she could have died. Now, this is getting pretty serious. Now, what you know about the affectional field diagram, can you tell me what he had to do? Now, let's look at our diagram. He had his mother-in-law here, which brought his wife here. What's the only solution? Here's exactly what I told him he had to do. I said, you've got to take the mother-in-law and question that she can really be that bad. I said, from your description, I question whether anybody could ever be that bad. Then you've got to doubt that it's true, and does he have a block between him and that rational line? He's got to do what to his own block? destroy it. He's got to become so curious to find out how wonderful she is that he goes through his own block to the rational line. Now, when he reaches the rational line, he has to make a decision fast. What? The sweetest woman on earth is my mother-in-law. Now, it's not enough just to go here, because if he barely goes across the rational line, where's his feelings for his wife? Acknowledgement. You have very much fun with a woman that you acknowledge? All right, let's watch what happens. By the way, at this point, there's still impotency. Right now, as he keeps pushing the mother-in-law higher, what finally happens, and this is the most beautiful thing, what finally happened to him? He would come in and he'd say, I can't get over it. She is darling. And I'd say, you talking about your wife? No, my mother-in-law. He fell in love with his mother-in-law. And did that push his wife at the very top? Well, to show you how wonderful this worked out, he believed that she was nicer than his own mother. He actually would call her mom and treat her as his own mother. Does that show you can do anything you want? Can you really love anybody you want if you choose to? Now, do you have an actual technique tonight to go from intense hatred to love? Now, some of you ladies laughed at this illustration because you think now your husband's got to have to really love your mother. Let me show you another illustration on this that'll sober you up pretty fast. Remember we said this was what? Other women. I'll give you a true story. Professor at the college where I used to teach, his wife had put blinkers on him. Blinds. He wasn't allowed to look. One day we were actually driving down the street, and I looked over at the sidewalk, and there was the most beautiful tanned legs in short shorts. And I said, look, there's nobody in the car but him and me. So he looks, and then he snaps that neck back in a forward position so fast it hurt. And then his comment was, she's not here. Then he snaps it back again, and the girl's gone. Then he snaps it back again in disgust, and he says, I can't win any which way. All right, now, she had put up such a block that he wasn't allowed to look until what enjoyment was he having when she wasn't there? None. I heard a story once that really, if this is affection, this here is admiration. Now, if you want to be a successful wife, you want your husband to do what to other women? Well, wait now, if he doesn't admire them, what's he going to be able to do to you? Some of you are looking at me real quick and you say, please, please define admiration fast. Admiration is when I look at a sunset and I admire it, but I let it set. Now, can you carry that forward in the illustration of the other woman? I think I got you so serious, I don't think some of you even know what it means to let the sun set. Could you stop it from setting anyway? All right, now let's assume that he goes into a negative syndrome for other women. Now, is it very likely that he will? I mean, eventually, whether his wife's there or not, would he even bother to look? All right, now he's going to take these 2 points of other women and push them how far down into a negative syndrome? If you could care less, where are you? Indifference. All right, we're going to push them at indifference. Now we're going to draw our normal distribution curve through 2 indifferent points, and watch. You'll get the same thing you did with Job when he said, behold, the thing that I have feared has come upon me. The thing that she feared was what? That he wouldn't love her. And now what's true? He doesn't. By the way, if we're drawing at 2 standard deviations on indifference, can we get her much above hatred? Now, it's interesting that this particular man, when he'd make comments about his wife, they were derogatory. In other words, it would be time in the evening to go home. I got to go home to that old hag again. Had she just about accomplished the mission for which she was afraid would happen? Now, as she progresses on the new idea, she's going to take the 2 points of other women and do what with them? Well, you want a real man. What's a real man think of the opposite sex? Like Mount Hood, a work of art. All right, now as these 2 points go higher, and I draw my new line through them, where's she sitting out here? Infinity. And who is the queen of the universe now? His wife. All right, what's this diagram do with jealousy? Whereas if you are a wife and you are jealous, what have you set into motion? You set into motion the cause which your insecurity has prompted, which will result in the very thing that you do not want to happen. I'd like to point out one more illustration on the affectional field diagram. We'll start out at point 0, and we'll make a decision that this is a wonderful girl, and we're going to marry her. We're going to go up to point A. Everything's wonderful. At point A, you marry her. Last week, we drew a diagram which actually showed the normal feelings that you have toward things. And if you remember, if you didn't trade in the car last week when you were still on an increasing rate, you ended up in the negative syndrome. Now, with people, it's a little different. Unless you use the 7 O's to dehumanize them, they will level off. Now, let's assume here that point B is 5 years and point C is 10 years. Now, for those of you who are in the selling field, you can use the same diagram and have point B 6 months and point C 1 year. For everything I'm going to describe tonight on a marriage will fit any other relationship between 2 people. All right, now let's pull points A, B, and C out of our diagram. Now we're going to pull them straight out and turn them. We want to get normal distribution curves. For example, from 0 to A, at every moment of time, do I have a normal distribution curve? Now it keeps changing in size, but I will have one all of the way. All right, now let's look at them. A will look like this. It has a lot of intensity, which is measured on the y-axis. It has very little depth, which is measured on the z-axis. Now, there's a reason for that. Depth is in relationship with time. And the more time I have, normally the more depth I have in a relationship. Now, in courtship, at point A, is there very much depth? They don't really know whether they love each other or not. Calls her up in the morning. I know he's calling up to make sure she's still alive or what. Do you love me? Oh, yes, I love you. Wasn't last night wonderful? Oh, yes. Are you ready to go to work? Yes. Lunchtime? What does he do instead of eat? Payphone. Hello. Are you on the payphone there? Yes. She's working too. They missed their lunch. That evening, they go out and tell each other they love each other 200 times. Are they reassuring each other? Candy, flowers, car door. And finally, they convince each other. The reason there's not much assurance is how much depth do we have? Not very much, but a lot of intensity. All right, now let's look at B. How much depth do I have in 5 years? Quite a bit. But what has happened to the intensity? It's dropping. There is more love in B than there is in A. But there's more excitement in A. All right, now let's look at C. By the way, you might not believe it, but there's more love in C than there is in B. But look at all of the depth. And how much intensity now? We're down to the 4 A's. You call that companionship. Is it enough to stay married? Well, if no one else comes along, it is. All right, now let's go back and look at this for just a moment. And let's use salesmen here as an illustration. At point A, do I give the red carpet treatment? They say, I have to have an order in 24 hours. You run to the main office, say, this order goes through above every other order. Why? If this order doesn't go through, I'll lose a customer. Are you insecure? All right, now after you've had the customer at point C for a year, they say, I have to have the order in 24 hours. You say, we'll do the very best we can. You go to the office and turn in with the regular orders and don't say a word. Why? Well, you have so much depth that you know what? I can treat this person almost any way I want because I feel security because of a relationship over time. All right, now let's go back to the marriage. After 10 years, she says one morning bright and early, get up and get your own breakfast. Now, back at point A, she invites you over to her apartment for candlelight dinner. How much security does she have? None. By the way, what shape's her hair in? And what shape's her hair in when she says, get up and get your own breakfast? Is she relying entirely on one dimension? Now, we determine the amount of love by multiplying intensity times depth. Is she trying to actually operate on the concept without multiplying it? In other words, she believes there's only one dimension to love, and it is depth, and therefore does she feel secure. Now, every time she does that, she is lowering the intensity. Now, you pick up the depth anyway with years, so you don't have to worry about that. But it's this intensity that we're after. Now, I know some people want that intensity so bad. They crave it. I'll give you an illustration. I managed my father-in-law's motel for a summer. People would come in to want to check in for a room, and I'd ask them what kind of room they want, and they would begin to tell me what kind of room, and I'd listen a little longer, and I'd say, well, I have this one. Then finally she would poke him. He'd say, is room 106 open? Well, I knew right away what it was all about. I'd check down. Oh, yes, 106 isn't taken. He'd sheepishly say, can we have 106? I'd say, of course. How long ago was it when you were married? They're all embarrassed. They're trying to do what in 106? Capture everything in this shaded area in one night. I watched their faces the next morning. Sad. You know what they actually obtained that night in 106? Acknowledgement, acceptance, approval, and appreciation. Did they have that at home? What did they want? Admiration, adoration, and infinite affection. And by the way, did they go back to their courtship days and realize that they actually had these three things then? But now as they go out to get in the car to leave the motel, does he open the car door for her? Oh, why? 10 years. She's strong enough to open the door herself. Flowers? Candy? I've got her. I know one barber here in town. His wife got terminal cancer. Now watch this real close. I'm going to draw my x-axis for all three. Now during courtship, how many negative syndromes do you have toward this girl? Well, she won't let you see anything bad, will she? All the skeletons are in all the closets, and all the closets are locked. The family gives you everything good. Everything's rosy. You see nothing bad. Did you know that some people actually marry a girl and never see her hair in curlers? A lot of hard work for the girl, but she makes the grade. All right, now, he's got 3 negative syndromes versus hundreds of positive auras. Now, over a period of time, what happens to him? Remember, negativism is not real, is it? So over a period of time, they disappear. If you think everything's blissful for courtship, you go to some of the lovers' places up on Council Crest or Mount Tabor, and are they all kissing? Some will sit there for 3 hours and fight. Now, after 10 years of marriage, do you remember the fighting? Think back right now in your courtship. Wasn't it roses? Did anything go wrong at all? Oh, just heavenly. I guarantee you there were things that went wrong. Why don't you know it now? Time has erased them. All right, now watch this particular barber. How many negative syndromes after 10 years? All of them. After all, you've been investigating her for 10 years. Has she been able to keep anything secret from you? You know every fault. Now, since you're wise, since you've cataloged them all, have you let anything slip by? So you got proof. Now remember, when I throw this many negative syndromes, is that the reason I've moved my positive aura from my ecstasy level down to my companionship level? All right, now watch the barber. While he's walking in the hall, up and down, and his wife's being operated on, what begins to happen to negative syndromes when he thinks she's going to die? They disappear. Do you know she survived that operation? 6 months later, she got cancer again, went in for another operation. Now, this time, did he have very many negative syndromes to erase? See, you want to get something real clean, what do? Like your car's real dirty. You wash it the first time, you get it really clean. No, but if you do several wash jobs repeatedly without it being too dirty, will you eventually get it clean? All right, now, she went through about 4 different operations, and each time he kept cleaning the negative syndromes. So by the 4th operation, how clean did he have the negative area? Very clean. So he's walking up and down the hospital corridor. The doctor comes out and he said, "You're very lucky, she's going to live again." You know, he was so thrilled that he mortgaged every piece of property he had to the hilt. Now, he was old enough to be conservative. Was he now in love? Now watch, age has nothing to do with youth. Because even though he was old enough to be conservative, when he was in love again, was he conservative? To the hilt, everything mortgaged. Said, what is going to happen if we have a recession? Who cares? I'm going on a honeymoon. I said, what's wrong with you? He says, I'm in love.